How did it happen that 137 rescuers couldn't pull out one trapped man? On the 24th of November, 2009, 26-year-old John Edward Jones, a medical student and a young family man, went into Nutty Putty Cave in the state of Utah, a familiar family outing on the eve of Thanksgiving. He turned into an unmarked passage and got stuck head down in a crack about as wide as a suitcase, roughly 100 meters from the entrance. Ahead of him lay 27 hours of struggle, a system of 15 pulleys, an anchor that tore loose, and an impossible choice. Why did an ordinary walk underground end with the cave being sealed shut in concrete? Here's how it all happened. John Edward Jones is 26 years old, and he has a plan for his whole life. He's studying to become a doctor at the University of Virginia, reading thick medical textbooks and dreaming of healing people. He has a young wife, Emily, and the family is eagerly awaiting a new arrival any day now. At home, he is loved and expected. John is the kind of person people call dependable, calm, polite, from a big family where everyone sticks together and is used to doing everything as a group. He stands nearly 183 centimeters tall and weighs around 90 kilograms. A big guy, but light on his feet and agile. His appearance is deceptive. In tight spaces he felt confident, because he had known them since childhood. John and his brothers grew up in Utah, and Utah is cave country. As boys they crawled underground, squeezed through narrow passages, got used to the darkness and the clay on their palms. For the Jones family, caves weren't an extreme sport or a test of courage. It was an ordinary weekend pastime, something like a hike in the woods. In the autumn of 2009, John is living far from home, in Virginia, buried in his studies. But for Thanksgiving, he flies to Utah to see his family. It's a rare chance to get everyone together, brothers, friends, familiar faces. On days like that, you don't want to sit at the table. You want to do something familiar and fun from your youth. And the Joneses have a tried and true way of doing exactly that, going underground. No one in this family thinks of a trip into a cave as a risk. John is a future doctor, a man who understands how the body works and what's dangerous for it. He's careful and level-headed, and that makes what happens next even harder to grasp. Neither his experience, nor his caution, nor hundreds of people on the surface will be able to change anything. For now, though, he's simply a young man who came home for the holiday, with his whole life still ahead of him. West of Utah Lake, among the dry hills, a hole in the ground hides the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave. It was discovered in 1960, and it got its unusual name from its walls. The rock inside is soft, pliable clay that feels like a sticky mass to the touch, hence the nickname Nutty Putty, something like soft putty. Fingers press into the walls, and the passages seem almost alive. This isn't a deep vertical system with shafts and drop-offs. Nutty Putty is a maze of tight, winding passages that snake underground for hundreds of meters. There are no underground rivers here, no dizzying chasms. There's something else? Tightness. Narrow passages you have to squeeze through sideways, twisting your whole body. Many of the sections have their own nicknames that cavers pass down to one another. Ed's Push, the Birth Canal, Scout Eater. The names sound almost homey, as if they were talking about an amusement ride, and that's exactly how the cave was seen. For years, Boy Scouts, students, and families with teenagers were brought here. Thousands of people a year went underground for an easy adventure. The Birth Canal was one of the favorite challenges, a very tight but passable squeeze, with a spot at the end where you can turn around and back your way out. Making it through was considered a point of pride, proof that you weren't afraid of tight spaces. But this reputation had a flip side. Soft rock means the walls don't always hold up under load. Tightness means a person can get stuck in a place rescuers physically can't reach. Nutty Putty had already bared its teeth. By 2009, it had been temporarily closed at least twice after visitors got stuck in narrow spots and had to be pulled out. Each time it ended well, and the cave was reopened. The problem was in the very geography of the underground. Many of the passages look alike, and in the beam of a headlamp, the landmarks blur together. All it takes is one wrong turn, and a familiar route turns into an unfamiliar dead end. The cave everyone believed was safe actually did not forgive mistakes. It was simply waiting for the person who would turn into the wrong passage and crawl in head first. On the evening of the 24th of November, 2009, a Tuesday, several cars pull up to the inconspicuous entrance in the hillside. Out of them climbs a group of about 11 people, brothers, friends, relatives. Thanksgiving is right around the corner, and everyone's in high spirits. Heading down into Nutty Putty is the perfect way to spend the evening before the holiday. A familiar cave, a familiar route, nothing new. Around 8 in the evening, one by one, the group ducks underground. Among them are John and his younger brother Josh. For both of them, it's not the first time down. They've been here before and remember the general layout of the passages. No one brings anything out of the ordinary. Headlamps, old clothes they don't mind getting caked in clay. The mood is light, almost festive. Underground you can hear voices, laughter, the rustle of clothing against stone. Fairly quickly the large group spreads out through the maze. That's almost always how it goes. Some crawl faster, some fall behind, some stop to catch their breath. Part of the group decides to find the birth canal. That very squeeze so many people come here for. Getting through it is a little adventure they'll talk about later up on the surface. John, along with a few companions, presses ahead, deeper into the cave, searching for the right passage. He's full of energy and confidence. In the darkness, where the only light is the narrow beam of the lamp on his forehead, the passages blend into one another. The walls are all equally soft and clayey, the turns all look alike. To keep from getting lost, you have to remember the exact sequence of squeezes, and memory fails easily when all around you is nothing but stone and blackness. No one senses danger that evening. The cave is seen as an amusement ride that thousands of people have passed through. Everyone has dinner ahead, a family holiday, plans for tomorrow. John crawls forward, hunting for the birth canal, and in his mind, he's already almost back on the surface, already at the table with his family. He doesn't know that just a few meters away lies a passage marked on no map, very much like the one he's looking for, and that in a few minutes he'll crawl into it head down. The mistake is born from something small. John is looking for the birth canal, but in the tangle of passages, he turns into a different one. An unmarked narrow squeeze near the section called Ed's Push. On the surface it looks like what he wants, the same tightness, the same crack dropping away below. John takes it for the route he's after, but this passage isn't on any map of the cave. No one had really crawled into it before. It leads to a dead end. To understand what comes next, it helps to picture the geometry. The passage narrows and drops almost straight down, at an angle of about 70 degrees. John thinks there's a spot ahead where he can turn around, like in the birth canal. And he does what seems logical. He goes in head down, pushing off with his feet, forcing his body into the narrow crack. The dimensions of that crack are roughly 25 by 46 centimeters. That's smaller than it sounds. Picture a rectangle the size of a small suitcase, stood on end. A big man of his build fits through a gap like that, only with effort, jamming his shoulders and chest against the walls. And this is where the trap of tightness springs shut. A person's body narrows toward the head and shoulders and widens toward the hips and chest. Moving forward head down, John pushes the narrow part of himself farther than he'll be able to push the wide part. He goes into the crack deeper than the way back will allow. With every centimeter down, backing out becomes harder. At some point, the passage becomes truly narrow. John hits a dead end. The turnaround he was counting on isn't here and never will be. One of his arms ends up pinned under his chest, the other twisted awkwardly. He hangs almost vertically, head down, in a blind stone pocket. There's no way forward, and the way back requires forcing the wide part of his body upward against his own weight, through the constriction he just passed. In that instant, a familiar adventure stops being a game. The realization doesn't come all at once. First, John tries to push himself back, the way he'd done hundreds of times in other passages. His body doesn't move. He tries again, harder, and understands that he's truly stuck, neither forward nor back. Every movement he makes to break free only drives his shoulders deeper into the stone. The worst part is the position itself. John hangs head down, almost vertical, wedged in a narrow crack deep underground, roughly 120 meters from the entrance if you follow the winding passages. For the human body, there's no more dangerous position. Normally, the heart pumps blood from the bottom upward, working against gravity. When a person is upside down, everything works in reverse. Blood rushes to the head, raises the pressure in the head, and the heart has to labor against the weight of its own blood. The body isn't built to hold up under that for long. After a few minutes upside down, it becomes hard to breathe. The internal organs press down on the diaphragm from above. Blood pools, tissue swells. Every hour of hanging head down is a mounting strain on the heart that can't be relieved as long as the body stays in that position. John, as a future doctor, surely understands what's happening to him. He knows the physiology better than a random tourist would. And that knowledge only makes it harder. He grasps just how serious it all is. Yet on the outside, he holds himself together. No panic, no shouting. Only a persistent, almost polite wish to get out. The cave around him is damp and cool. The soft clay that made the walls feel so pliable turns here into an enemy. It fills every gap, gives him nothing to grip, as if embracing his body from all sides. John has wedged tightly into the crack, like a cork in the neck of a bottle. The longer he hangs, the more he swells, and the more firmly he sits in the stone. Getting out on his own is impossible. That's clear both to him and to the few who are already trying to reach him in the dark. The only hope is that people will come from outside, many people with ropes and gear. But the surface is far away, and the clock is already running, and every hour of it works against John Jones. While John hangs in the stone pocket, his younger brother works his way toward the sound of his voice. Around 9:30 in the evening, Josh reaches his trapped brother, but there isn't much he can see. Only his brother's legs stick out of the crack, dark sneakers in the light of the lamp. Everything else is deep below, in the narrow throat of the passage. Josh grabs the legs and pulls. He does it with all his strength, but in such tight quarters there's no leverage, nowhere to brace, no room to turn and put real force into it. He pulls again, and John's body sits dead solid. Every attempt drains them both and may only be driving his brother deeper into the crack. One person here is powerless. That becomes clear fast. What strikes the witnesses is John's behavior. He doesn't lash out at his brother. On the contrary, he encourages Josh, speaks to him steadily, as if he were the one who should be comforting rather than being comforted. According to those close to him, at one point John says a line that many would later retell. "Go, get them, brother." He understands that the two of them can't manage this, and that help is needed from outside. Josh makes a wrenching decision, to leave his brother alone in the dark and crawl for help. It goes against everything, to leave one of your own in trouble, but there's no other way. He gets out of the tight passage, works his way back through the maze to the exit, and climbs to the surface. There, he calls for rescuers. The call goes out late in the evening of the 24th of November. From that moment, a machine starts turning that over the next day will grow into one of the largest rescue operations in Utah's history. People begin converging on the cave. Local cavers, firefighters, sheriff's deputies, volunteers. But all of that is up there, on the surface, in the cold night air. And deep underground, a man remains, pinned head down in a tight crack, alone with the darkness and the ticking of his own heart. And help is only just gathering, and it gathers slowly. The first professional rescuer to reach John was a woman named Susie Motola. She got to him around midnight, already the 25th of November. By that point, John had spent several hours upside down. Squeezing through to the trapped man was a trial in itself. Susie crawled through narrow, winding passages where a body barely fits, and then found herself above that very crack. All she could see in front of her was a pair of dark blue sneakers. John himself, his face, his hands, those were impossible to see. He was lower, head down, in a blind constriction. She had to communicate, literally, with a man's feet. John's character shows here too. Hearing that someone has reached him, he finds the strength to be polite. He says, "Hi, Susie, thanks for coming." And then he adds something that reveals the full depth of his situation. "But I really, really want to get out." Simple words, and behind them, hours of hanging head down and a growing fear. Susie works beside him for about 2 hours. She tries everything she can think of under such conditions. She helps run a rope from John back to the other rescuers to try pulling, but the friction of the rope against the stone is too great, and the first attempts get nowhere. She tries to shift him even a little, to change his position, but lifting him alone is impossible. So, Susie does what she can. She cares for him. She runs a water bottle along his extended arm, so the drops trickle down, and at least a little reaches his mouth. She cuts away his jeans, trying to free up a few precious centimeters he might move by. And so, John doesn't sink into despair. She quietly sings hymns, calm melodies, something to keep him conscious and keep him from being left alone with his fear. These are the first hours of a long struggle. One rescuer at the feet of one trapped man, in tight quarters, in the dark, more than 100 meters from the entrance. And on the surface, meanwhile, an entire army is assembling. All night and all the next day, cars pull up to the hill above the cave. Rescuers come from all over the Wasatch Front region. Fire crews, search teams, experienced cavers, doctors, volunteers. Over the course of the operation, as many as 137 people will be involved. It's an enormous force, thrown into the effort to save one trapped man. But numbers decide almost nothing underground. The problem with Nutty Putty is that its passages can't be widened and a crowd can't be sent through them. The squeezes are so narrow that only one person at a time can work at the crack with John. While one rescuer struggles at his feet, dozens of others wait their turn in the tight galleries behind, in a chain stretched out over 100 meters. All the gear has to be passed by hand: ropes, pulleys, tools, water. Every item is dragged through the narrows from hand to hand, twisting through the clay. What would take minutes on the surface stretches into hours underground. Every action comes at the cost of the enormous effort of dozens of people. The doctors who have come down to John understand the most terrible thing. Time is working against him, not in the abstract, but literally. Every hour upside down is destroying his body. The heart is wearing out, the lungs are compressed, the swelling is mounting. The medics know a person can't hang upside down indefinitely and stay alive. There's a limit, and John is drawing near it. John himself keeps surprising everyone who talks to him. He stays polite, thanks the rescuers, apologizes for causing so much trouble. He asks about his family. People who are used to other people's despair are struck by his composure. Perhaps that very composure is what keeps him going so long. And the rescuers do the one thing that can give a chance. They build a hauling system. Right there, in the tight quarters and near total darkness, they begin assembling a structure of ropes and pulleys meant to draw John out of the crack. It's painstaking, slow work, and everything depends on it. By 4 in the afternoon, on the 25th of November, the rescuers finally put together what they've been battling over for many hours. By this point, John has been hanging upside down for about 19 hours. The structure they've managed to build is complex, a system of block and tackle, a set of pulleys and ropes that lets a few people lift a load many times greater than their own strength. In all, about 15 pulleys are used in the system. They're needed to redirect the rope around the tight turns of the passage. Pulling straight is impossible. The crack runs at an angle, and the force has to be routed around it. Each pulley reduces friction and changes the direction of the pull. The rope is fastened to anchors, metal points driven straight into the cave wall. 8 people take hold of the rope. The idea is simple. Take part of the body's weight off to relieve the pinned shoulders, and then slowly, centimeter by centimeter, draw John up out of the crack. 8 rescuers begin to pull. The rope goes taut, the system creaks, and John's body gradually gives way. For the first time in nearly a day, he begins to move, not down, but up, toward the exit. For everyone underground at that moment, it's a moment of hope. John comes around, meets the rescuers' eyes. By their accounts, he even smiles through the pain and exhaustion. After so many hours of nightmare, it seems the end is near. Just a little more, and they'll pull him out, carry him up, hand him to the doctors. People worn out by sleepless work and tight quarters feel it was all worth it. They raise John higher and higher. His head and shoulders begin to come out of the narrowest spot. Every centimeter comes hard, but it comes. In the galleries behind, dozens of people wait, ready to take him and pass him along the chain to the exit. The doctors are standing by. It seems that rescue lies just ahead. But this whole structure rests on a few points driven into the soft, unreliable rock of Nutty Putty, the very rock that gave the cave its gentle name. The weight of a grown man, multiplied by the strength of 8 people pulling and a system of pulleys, comes down on anchors that can't be trusted. And the hope that flared underground hangs, quite literally, by a thread. Around 5 in the evening, the thing that everyone who knew this rock had feared happens. One of the anchors holding the whole system tears out of the wall. The soft limestone of Nutty Putty couldn't bear the load. The metal point driven into the stone flies loose, and in that same second, the entire structure loses its support. The rope goes suddenly slack. John's body, which had been slowly and agonizingly raised almost to the very mouth of the crack, breaks free and slides back down. He falls into the same vertical throat they'd been pulling him out of. Only now he sits in it even more tightly and firmly than before. Everything won over hours of work is lost in an instant. It's a double blow. Physically, John is once again in the original trap, but over the intervening hours, his body has swollen and weakened. More than 20 hours upside down have already done their destructive work, and now he's wedged more tightly than at the very start. Psychologically, the blow is no lighter. A minute earlier, it had seemed rescue was near, that the nightmare was about to end. For the rescuers, the failed anchor is a disaster, not only emotional, but technical. The rock can't be loaded a second time in the same spot. If an anchor has already torn out, it means the stone around it is crumbled and won't hold. Finding a new reliable support in the soft limestone, in tight quarters where there's no room to turn, is nearly impossible. The rescuers are left without a working point onto which they could run a rope and pull again. The rescuers keep looking for a way. But from this moment, the chances of pulling John out alive rapidly dwindle. Every new attempt runs up against either the geometry of the crack or the unreliability of the walls, or John's worsening condition. The body that had held out for nearly a day begins to give. The moment the anchor tore loose, many rescuers would later remember as the turning point. Before it, there was real hope. After it, all that remained was the struggle to ease a man's final hours. John once again hangs head down deep in the cave, and this time, the system that was supposed to save him lies a useless heap of ropes and pulleys. Toward evening, another rescuer works his way to John, Brandon Kowalis. What he sees is hard to describe. In his words, John is fading fast. A man who not long ago had politely thanked the rescuers and held himself astonishingly calm, now drifts in and out of consciousness. His body is failing on every front. John speaks incoherently. At some moments he says he sees angels and demons. His mind is already slipping away, reality blending with visions. It's a sign that the brain is suffering from a lack of oxygen and the stagnation of blood. The body sends other signals too. John controls his movements less and less. His breathing grows heavy and labored. For the doctors, it's a clear and alarming picture. Fluid is building up in the lungs, making it ever harder for them to work. The long time head down has caused blood and fluid to pool in the lungs and the brain, and the body is ceasing to cope with the strain. The medics beside him understand what's happening, and understand there's almost nothing they can do. You can't give full care to a man you can't reach with your hands, whom you can't turn over, lay down, or hook up to equipment. All that's available to the rescuers is to be near him, to talk to him, to try to ease his condition with words and their presence. The atmosphere underground during these hours is heavy. People who have spent more than a day without sleep or rest, crawling through tight passages, hauling gear, building and rebuilding the hauling system, now see that they are losing the very person all of it was for. They did everything they could, and it turned out not to be enough. John gradually slips away. The intervals of consciousness grow shorter, and the visions drift further from the reality of the cave. The voice that so struck the rescuers with its politeness and composure falls quiet. Somewhere on the surface, his wife is waiting for him, and his whole big family gathered for the holiday. And deep underground, in a narrow crack, by the light of strangers' lamps, John Jones's heart approaches its limit. Late in the evening of the 25th of November, more than a full day has passed since John crawled into that ill-fated passage. His condition goes from grave to hopeless. The rescuers beside him are powerless to change it. Not long before midnight, at a few minutes to 12, John Edward Jones dies. He spent about 27 hours in the trap. The official cause is cardiac arrest and asphyxiation, brought on by spending too long head down. The heart, which had worked so many hours against gravity, and the compressed lungs finally gave out. The doctors pronounce him dead right there, deep in the cave. For the people who had fought for his life for more than a day, it's a blow no one can be ready for. 137 people, firefighters, cavers, doctors, volunteers, did everything within human power. They crawled through the narrows, built a system of 15 pulleys, pulled, searched for new points of support, gave him water, and talked to him. And still they couldn't pull out one trapped man, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because the cave itself left them no chance. The rescuers, exhausted and crushed, begin making their way to the surface. Many of them will carry that night inside for years afterward. Some will leave rescue work. Some will be unable to go underground for a long time. They remember John's voice, his politeness, his thanks for coming, and how it all ended. John's body remains in the crack, deep in the cave, head down, where he got stuck. Retrieving it that night is impossible. It's wedged in a narrow, unreliable passage, in rock that crumbles under load, more than 100 meters of tight passages from the entrance. Up above, in the cold November darkness, the rescuers come out of the ground empty-handed. An operation that began as an attempt to bring a man home to the holiday, to his family, to his loved ones, ended with them unable to bring him out at all. And now they had to decide what to do next. The question of recovering the body arose at once and proved agonizing. To get John out of the crack, the rescuers would have to do the same work as in the rescue, only now with no hope of the reward of a life saved. And the risk was exactly the same. The engineers and cavers assessed the situation soberly. The rock in that spot is too fragile, the passage too narrow, and it drops at a dangerous angle. Any attempt to cut the body from the rock or pull it out by force threatened to collapse. The rescuers who went in after him could themselves get stuck or die in the same trap. Putting new lives at risk for the recovery of a body was impossible. The Jones family, crushed by grief, made a hard decision together with the authorities, not to attempt a recovery. John would stay where he died. The cave he had chosen for the last adventure of his life would become his grave. For his family, it was a terrible choice, but the only one that didn't threaten new deaths. On the 9th of December, 2009, people came to Nutty Putty for the last time. Using explosives, they brought down the ceiling near the spot where the body lay, and all the entrances to the cave were filled in and sealed with concrete. The maze that thousands of people had passed through over the decades was closed forever. Nutty Putty officially ceased to exist as a cave for visitors and became the resting place of one man. On the surface, over the sealed entrance, a memorial marker was placed with the name of John Edward Jones. Now, the hill in western Utah holds beneath it not just an abandoned cavity in the limestone, but a grave. John's body to this day remains deep underground, in that very crack, head down, where his last descent came to an end. It's a rare and heavy outcome. Usually rescue operations end either in a rescue or in the return of the body to the family for burial. Here, neither happened. The cave took a man and did not give him back, and all that people could do was seal it so that no one, ever again, could repeat that path and end up in the same trap. And on the far side of the concrete, a life was left that this night had cut in two. Emily, John's wife, was widowed in her early 20s. The man who had traveled to Utah to see his family for the holiday never came home again. A young family that had so recently been making plans for the future was, in a single stroke, deprived of a husband and a pillar. In the span of a single day, the family lost a husband, a brother, a son, and a future doctor. A man who was calm, dependable, loved, who had known caves since childhood and knew how to get out of them. This time, the experience didn't help. The loss fell as a heavy burden on the whole large Jones family, and with it, they would have to go on living, keeping his memory alive. The story swept across the entire country. John Jones's death was written up in newspapers, reported on the news, discussed online. It especially shook the caving community. People who regularly go underground themselves and understand well how thin the line is between adventure and trap. Many of the rescuers who worked that night couldn't recover for a long time. Cavers around the world went over what happened again and again. What went wrong? How did an experienced, calm man who had known caves since childhood end up in a dead end from which there was no way out? For the community, it became a painful question with no comforting answer. In 2016, a film inspired by this tragedy came out, The Last Descent. It told John's story to a wide audience, showing both the man himself and the work of the rescuers and the impossible choice that faced everyone involved. For many viewers, it was their first encounter with what had happened in Nutty Putty. The name John Edward Jones has sounded ever since like a warning, not a legend, not a campfire ghost story. But what happened to a young man who had everything ahead of him and who died because of one wrong turn in the dark? His story reminds us at what cost a moment of inattention can come, in a place where the earth closes over your head. Over time, this tragedy changed the way people look at safe tourist caves. For years, Nutty Putty was considered entertainment for families and young people. a place where beginners and tourists were brought. John's death showed that even a cave like that can kill a grown, experienced, physically strong man. The main lesson rang out harsh and simple. A tight passage a person crawls into, head down leaves, almost no way back. The body is built so that pushing forward into a narrowing is easier than pulling yourself back out against your own weight. Experienced cavers have long known the rule. You must never go head first into an unfamiliar narrow crack that leads downward. John's story became a tragic confirmation of that rule. The second important thought concerns the very nature of danger underground. What killed John was not the depth and not an underground river. He was killed by geometry, the narrowness of the crack and the position of his body. He was not all that far from the entrance and not all that deep. There were dozens of people around, ready to help, and still it proved impossible to save him. Sometimes the very shape of a space becomes a deadly trap from which there is no technical way out. From this comes the third lesson, the hardest for rescuers. From a blind, tight dead end and fragile rock, it may be physically impossible to get a person out, even with the strength of 100 people and modern equipment. The soft limestone won't hold anchors. The narrowness admits no more than one rescuer, and the upside-down position kills faster than a hauling system can be assembled. Against the cave itself, any effort is powerless. After this story, attitudes toward access into wild, unexplored caves became stricter. More attention began to be paid to maps, to marking dead-end passages, to rules of conduct in the narrows. Nutty Putty was sealed forever, but the memory of what happened remained a warning to everyone who goes underground. The story of John Edward Jones is a reminder of a simple and stern truth. Underground, there is no right to a one-minute mistake, one wrong turn, one move forward head first in the dark. And the situation can no longer be reeled back, no matter how many people come to help. The cave does not forgive, and it does not let go.